Welcome folks to another thrilling installment from Crackfox Studios, where enthusiasm vastly exceeds expertise, and yet somehow, against all mathematical probability, things occasionally turn out rather nicely. So with this video, I'll be producing Halo on the Halot X1. Or should that be Halo on the Halot? I'm not sure really. Halot. It's a bit like, why is Sean Bean not Sean Bourne or Sheen Bean? Anyway, sorry, where was I? Where am I? So in this video, we'll be basically seeing just how fast I can get from a big cardboard box all the way to successful prints of this wonderful Master Chief figurine from Wicked Studios. Right, before we dive into that glorious chaos, I must turn, reluctantly, but I hope successfully, to that age-old YouTube tradition, the shameless beg for approval. You see, I do this channel in my spare time, which is to say between the hours of midnight and exhaustion. And competing with full-time YouTubers is rather like entering a Formula 1 race with a Flintstones car. So any support really helps. Things like, if you could watch this entire video without lapsing into a coma, perhaps drop a comment below, even if it's just to correct my pronunciation of literally everything. If you do that, the algorithm overlords would be most pleased. And a like would be splendid, a subscribe would be magnificent, and if you fancy supporting the channel financially, there are links below where you can exchange real money for the dubious honour of enabling my printing addiction. Think of this as sort of crowdfunding a midlife crisis, but with small plastic toys instead of sports cars and leather jackets. And sadly, a distinct lack of a supermodel girlfriend in her 20s. And fear not, my FDM faithful, although there was quite a lot of resin knocking about the place in this video, the entire base was done in FDM, and I'll be showing that too. So with all that finally said, I'm sure you'll be delighted to know it's time to crack on. So as I mentioned, this is the Master Chief from Wicked Studios. I got this via their Patreon, but if you're not a member, I think you can get it from their Gumroad, links in the description. I don't get a commission for that. I do for some of the other affiliate links, but it's clearly marked down below. It's usually at this point where I add in all the magnet holes. So I have the choice of building it up for things like Xenophore highlighting, but then taking it apart again to do all the details and all the nooks and crannies. However, as you can see, when everything was imported, it all came in a big jumble, and some bits just weren't quite in the right place, or at least I didn't have faith that if I committed to putting magnet holes into the model, that they would actually marry up correctly once printed. It is an absolute joy and incredibly useful when you import everything into Blender, that everything is in the exact place as modelled, so that you can make those magnet holes with confidence, or anything else you might need to do. But for this one, in the interest of time, and not wanting to rebuild the model up completely in 3D, I thought I'd just print it and figure it all out later. If anybody out there has got some clever tips how they get around this particular slightly tricky problem, then let me know in the comments. So it was round about at this point where we decided it might be a good idea to get the printer out of its box and actually set up. Some things to note about the Halot, whatever it is. It's small, it's light, it looks really great. It's got these ace little levers that act like a quick release for the VAT, which are extremely handy. Now the whole LCD screen and the VAT actually lifts up to the static build plate, which is quite unusual. The claim being the build plate remains steady, and so does your print, with the implied benefit of improved print accuracy. There'll be more on that later. And quite a lot has been said about this quite curious and nifty looking build plate, with this sort of twisting release mechanism thing, and a sort of odd structure at the back of it, ribbed for our pleasure. And I'll let you know what I think about that too, in due course. So PioCreat, who make the Halot X1, who are part of Creality, or kind of an offshoot of Creality, were kind enough to send me this and ask me to do a video using it. They didn't pay me or anything, so all thoughts and views are my own. And it was nice of them to send a version of it with this little pump too, so I'll give that a bit of a go and let you know what I think. Setup was refreshingly painless, the usual affair really. The only slight hoop you have to jump through is just install this little pump head, which when it's not in use, it sits on a corresponding clip behind the VAT. Not 100% sure of my opinion of this in terms of cleanliness. Not everybody loves pumps for a sort of general cleanliness reason, so we'll see how it pans out. I actually quite like pumps because I don't tend to change resin that much. I like the fact that they can auto refill the VAT because it stresses me out thinking I'm going to run out. Anyway, went off to do a cones of calibration V3, and you might notice it says feed heating there. Unlike my M7 Pro, that the actual VAT has a heating pump, the circulatory heating pump, it seems that the Halot X1 only heats the resin as it's pumping it through. If you're not using the pump, i.e. your VAT's already full of resin, then it's not going to get heated, which does actually explain why I had to go from around 2 seconds exposure to nearly 3, just over 3. On the M7 Pro, I can print at 2 seconds because the heating makes a big difference. But to me, as long as it prints fantastically. I don't mind about the odd second here and there. It might matter to some people, but I'm just interested in whether it's going to be a good, easy printing experience. As you can see, the whole VAT and LCD screen has lifted all the way up to the build plate, which is quite a novelty. On the subject of novelties, and I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, but the build plate, not only is it quite interesting with the sort of twisty grip things, it can be pulled straight out because it's got clamps that hold the build plate in place only when it's printing. So no need for any like big messy screws that you can get resin all over. And even though this is only a small piece, the twisty handle things work perfectly. And as you can see there, that's how easy it is to slot it back into its place. Okay, so I was pretty happy with that. So it was about time we got the actual Master Chief on the build plate and print it away. And a quick little story about, how many years ago? 4 years ago, when I had my first ever 3D printer, which was the Anycubic Photon Mono 4K. I printed a handful of figurines and I stopped using it for 2 years because nothing would ever fit together. And it's only recently, having picked up the hobby again, about this time last year, that I realised it was because I was putting all the supports on the connected areas of the STL. Now I thought I was being super smart and putting the supports on parts of the model that were never going to be seen, rather than hidden around the back, but still, kind of damaging detail. And I just thought that things weren't going together because 3D printing wasn't particularly good. It was just that I wasn't particularly good at 3D printing, more to the point. And I gave up for 2 years. And it's only recently that I found out, which I'm quite embarrassed to admit, that putting supports on those connecting parts is the worst thing you could do, because that's where the pulling forces are at the strongest. And no wonder I was getting warping and stuff like that. So since finding that out by a random comment on a Facebook post from somebody else, it suddenly dawned on me, and now I'm getting prints that go together like those machined metal things where you can't see the join. Well, not quite that good, but still really, really good compared to what I used to be getting. So fast forward to today, and I'm actually giving Chitubox a try. I usually used to use lychee, but all seems quite a similar affair, to be honest. I decided to angle the torso at this orientation because of, like I say, keeping the supports away from those connecting areas and away from the point of view of anybody who's admiring the finished thing. I say anyone, it's usually just me in my sort of dark studio, just staring at it every now and again. But actually, I probably will put this up for sale on Etsy once it's all done. Then onto the all-important drainage holes. I've seen photos of people's projects from various Facebook groups and Discord groups where parts of their STLs literally look like Swiss cheese. There's so many drainage holes put in there. So I've been using the same thought process of just putting them all over the sort of connecting sort of areas that are going to be completely hidden to make sure that there's no suction and there's lots and lots of drainage. And I suppose it's a case of you can't have too many, maybe. I don't know. If I'm wrong about that, or there is a secret tip that you know about drainage holes, then pop them in the comments for everybody to read. Now, as handy as I'm sure having these blanks can be at times, because they were so delicate, a bunch of them failed in the print. So after the print was done, realised that there was a load of them floating around in the vat, which I had to do a quick clean up to get rid of, which I'll briefly show you in a moment. But anyway, onto supports. I always use Lychee's automatic supports because I just don't have the patience to go around and put a single support on every single area that needs it. And all the time, automatic supports are getting better and better. So I thought I'd use Chitubox's automatic ones and see how they get along. Because at the end of the day, you want things that are going to save you time. And if they're there, touted as a benefit and a useful tool, I want to try them out and see if they're, effective and they actually kind of are worth the shortcut, should we say, as opposed to being very surgical about where you put them manually. The only thing I'm never really sure of is how many to use, and I usually always go for medium because I see people using like a lot thinner and a lot less. Being in England, the sort of ambient sort of temperatures usually around, the high teens if you're lucky, or sometimes, obviously in the winter a lot lower than that. And if your vat hasn't got a heater, such as the Halot X1, then I've never had much luck with a few thin supports. I've always gone for a kind of safe, not sorry kind of approach. And what I usually do as well is swap a few over to heavy and also add a few heavy as well underneath at the first sort of anchor points, if you like, and some key areas. So let's see how they get on. And I can't believe how dirty I've managed to get the lid already. And I've only done a couple of calibration prints. I have to say I do love how the orange lid matches these awesome orange accessories from whambamsystems.com. They were very kind to send them over to me, these silicone mats and pots and stuff like that, and a few other things. They are fantastic, actually. I really, really like them. And I'm honestly not saying that just because there's an affiliate link in the description that I get a small commission from. That slat mat there that I'm working on has been an absolute godsend for cleanliness. It's so easy to clean. But anyway, back to the other thing I'm supposed to be giving an opinion on. As you saw there, where I was waffling on about the mats, that the twisty plate thing was fantastic. Literally, the prints just dropped off right in front of me. But it works. The little bits, obviously, you had to sort of scrape off like usual, but nothing more than a normal build plate. The only thing I do have to say about it, and this is when I realised that there were some things floating around in my vat, is that there was the odd bit of sort of debris gets caught in the sort of ridges on the back of the plate. I have to say though, the ridges on the back of the plate, when you pull it out, don't hold any resin. I would have thought that that resin would have pooled in there from the printing process, but when you take it off, that back of that, the plate at the back is very, very clean. It might only be a small thing to some people, but I hate when you have to scrape the leftover resin that's on the top of a build plate and hope it drops down into the vat without making a splash everywhere. So as part of the process to try and clean up anything that's in the vat, I use this handy little wham bam sort of plunger thing. And I kind of put it in the wrong place a little bit there. And as is commonplace nowadays, the LCD screen lights or cures a layer of resin across the whole screen, and you just peel it away and hopefully capture any floating bits along with it. And if you've got a plunger like this or some leftover support material, you can pull away these cursed lasagna sheets and hopefully any leftover debris in the process. Thankfully, I just caught the edge of the actual area that gets exposed, and you can see there, actually pulling it away, how much smaller the actual LCD screen is than the area of the vat. So don't get, excited by the size of the vat, thinking you're going to have a massive build volume, because the build volume of the Halot X1 is actually slightly smaller than the M7 Pro that I've got. Oh, I feel some tech specs coming on. Okay, so the build volume of the Halot X1 is 211.68 times 118.37 times 200 millimeters, which is slightly smaller than my M7 Pro by a few centimeters here and there. But it does boast a 16K screen as opposed to the M7 Pro's 14K screen, which actually makes the Halot's 14 by 19 micrometers pixel size a good chunk smaller and more detailed than the M7 Pro's 16.8 times 24.8 micrometers. And that is but a few of the nifty tricks it's got. But what does all this mean to us figurine and collectible makers in reality, or creality to be on brand? Well, I'll show you. Well, I'm pleased to report it looks utterly fabulous. All the details are sharp, clear. I can't see any major issues whatsoever. Let's have a look at the head. Again, all the textures and the crisp panel lines are sharp as anything. No major dramas. Certainly nothing you can see without a real close-up camera. The pattern on his piping there is exceptionally good. So let's compare it to print off with the M7 Pro, shall we? So to make things consistent, because the both resins were a slightly different shade of grey, I've hit them with some mid-grey primer and then hit them from above with some pure white, just to get things even. And there's barely anything to choose between them, to be honest. I'm happy to ignore the banding on the one on the right from the M7 Pro. Obviously something was wrong with the way I set it up, more than likely. I'm mainly interested in the panel lines, the sharpness and the crispness of the details in that, and the piping around the sort of cheek area, visor, and all the sharp edges of the helmet in general. Both look absolutely exceptional. And if anything, I think the Halot X1 does shade it, to be honest. And that's not even including the sort of banding issue that I had on the M7 Pro's helmet. That's nothing to do with the machine, that's user error. But I suppose it is to be expected that the sharper details, the small details, would be sharper on the Halot X1. It does, after all, have a smaller pixel size, so it means better details. Obviously, a lot more obvious when you are quite close up on camera, but it's sort of half an arm's length away, shall we say. It's impossible to tell them apart, to be honest. The only real issue that I had printing this figurine was on the gun part. Couldn't quite get a good orientation at first, and the one at the bottom, you can see that the trigger finger went a little bit weird. So I ended up printing it pointing straight up into the air. However, the sort of flash hider attachment at the end, or whatever you want, it was a big flash hider, to be fair, is so thin and flimsy that on the top one, it broke off during the washing process. That's obviously to do with the STL. I was going to go back and fill it in, but I decided to use the donor one that I'd printed earlier with the Duff fingers, and just cut off the flash hider and swap them over. Unfortunately, I sort of broke that a little bit. That's just something to be mindful of. If you are printing this yourself, you might want to thicken that part up, or even print it solid. So with all the body parts printed off and ready for tidying up, it was over to the base. Now, it's such a large base that it wouldn't fit on either of the resin printers, so it was over to the trusty Bamboo H2D. Now, this base does come in numerous parts, but they're more cut up for a resin printer. There's no kind of flat edges to a lot of the parts that would make it easier to print for us FDM folk. So we decided to combine it into one big piece and see where I could cut it myself. And it ended up actually being quite simple. It was just one big cut through the center at an angle. The main deciding factor of how I wanted to print was the spike on his helmet and the sort of armor protrusion from his shoulder. I wanted them to be pointing as straight up as possible. And the angle of the rocks on the base made it quite simple to sort of angle it about 45 degrees and cut it straight through the middle. I thought it'd be through an area with quite a lot of detail that would be easy to sort of hide the seam without anybody noticing it too bad. So here it is in Bamboo Studio in its two halves. So here you can see the armor protruding up in a way that I thought would print well. And then the real thing is it's going to have some supports underneath here, but I think that was the best angle and the best thing to do. And this thing would only be a little bit of a worry because to make sure that was going to get supported correctly and not print in midair. In terms of settings, the textured build plate setting, I do actually have the BQ Frostbite build plate, which is absolutely fantastic for bed adhesion. The affiliate link in the description. Do get a small commission. I don't even think I've actually sold any, but but there's always a first one. Using the 0.4 nozzle, using the high flow as well, which doesn't seem to have changed too much on any kind of time savings and stuff. I haven't really sort of kind of looked into that too much. The matte high flow, which I have calibrated for the high flow. The strength, I just put the gyroid. Definitely go gyroid. Never go grid. It catches on the end of the extruder. Sparse infill 5% usually fine. Speed, slid down the bridging just so that some of the underhangs and stuff like that would print a little bit better. And support went for a tree slim. And the Z top distance I always go with just under double the layer height, so 0.2. Now, thanks to putting the infill down to 5%, the print time went from 2.5 days to just 1 day, 20 hours, and pretty much the same for the second half as well. Now, the print was incredible. I was extremely happy with it. It even stuck together well, despite the fact that I didn't put any kind of keys or connecting pins or anything. Gave it a little bit of a trim with the old knife, and then, you know me, it's over to the resin sort of coat and letting the surface tension just sort of sit in the nooks and crannies, and then hit it with the old UV lamp. And that was the seam filled. Now, don't worry about the shiny texture, because once you get primer on it and a lick of paint, especially because it's on a sort of rock texture area, the complexity of the paint job I shall hopefully do on it will hide all that, no problem. One thing that you need to do if you're using resin in this way is to give everything a good spray of IPA alcohol and a wipe down, because even if it's cured, it'll still have that residue on it. And what will happen when you come to paint it is that the paint won't dry, and you'll see damp spots everywhere. You'll still probably get some even when you've given it a clean, but they're easy to spot because, like I say, they won't be drying. So just get a Q-tip, a bit of IPA, clean that little spot, a little bit more primer in that spot, and that's it, done. Finishing for all the resin parts wasn't too difficult at all. It was mainly just filing down the sort of craters that get made by the supports. But because I'd sort of hidden them around the back, I wasn't going to try and get them perfectly smooth at this stage. No one's really going to see them. I went with 80, 180, and then 400 grit sandpapers. That got it down to a reasonable smoothness, and then gave everything a little bit of a wash to get rid of all the dust, ready for priming. And I always use the Rust-Oleum surface primers, and I went to town like an absolute loon. And here it is in all its glory, hastily put together with a bit of blue tack. Not quite ready to glue it all together at this stage. I want to be able to separate the parts so I can paint it a lot easier. As you can see, it's utterly gorgeous. Fantastic work by Wicked Studios as usual, and a fantastic print, I have to say, by the Halot X1. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering, what do I think of the Halot X1? I absolutely love it. I think it's a great bit of kit. It looks great. It's small, compact. It's got great little features with the sort of big handles that make removing the vat very easy. But the build plate mechanism, that it does work. It's brilliant. Just being able to twist and the thing pops off. The quality is, as you've seen, fantastic. Perhaps even a shade sharper than some of its competitors. I'm extremely grateful from PioCreat reaching out and offering me the printer for free. My opinions are my own, but I do think it is a fantastic bit of kit. Which printer would I choose? And again, AnyCubic actually gave me the M7 Pro, so thank you to them, but my thoughts are my own on this again. Okay, so the M7 Pro, I love the heater. It means that I can shave off an entire second per layer from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. And the larger build plate. I mean, it's only a little bit, and probably doesn't make that much difference because you don't always like crowd your build plate that much anyway, so are you really pushing it to the extremes? And with the Halot, as I said, I love all these like cool little features. The cleanliness of it is fantastic. I love being able to just really easily lift off the build plate because of that clamping system. The fact that the resin seems to seep through the gaps of the build plate, so you don't get any drips when you're taking it off. Even these little indents on the bottom, which means I can pick it up and move it around really easily because I'm limited on space. So I'm always swapping around where my printers are. Which one would I buy? Man, it's a tough one. Well, actually, let's swap it. Which one am I going to sell? Because at the end of the day, I don't really need 2 resin printers and I can't decide. They are both brilliant with some differences. So it's going to come down to your personal choice in terms of what you need and what you're after. I'm probably going to keep both of them, to be fair. Actually, I'm just grateful that they've actually reignited my enjoyment of resin printing, despite all the mess, which I absolutely hate. The end results kind of outweigh the sort of annoyance of getting to the end results. And both printers make that process a lot easier in their own way. And also, the Bamboo HDD is great as well for the bases. If you want to see more detail on how I sort of started combining resin and FDM printing to great effect, or just some 100% FDM prints, head over to my channel and take a look through some of my past videos. Especially the Optimus Prime helmet that I made myself in Blender and then printed. The viewing figures on that one are shite. Remember to drop a like, subscribe, share, comment, and tell the algorithm that you like my stuff. Massively appreciated. Thank you to all my Patreons. Head over there for some cool benefits and early access stuff, and still trying to grow it. Again, difficult in the spare time, but if you can find a way to support a spare timer like myself, then you will forever have a special place in my heart. Right, I've waffled on for too long already, so I'm going to head off. Hope to speak to you in the comments. I always answer every single comment I get. And if you need any help or advice, then ask away there or join the free Patreon where you can speak to me directly. Thanks again to PioCreat and Anycubic. Really appreciate the support. Right, I'll catch you next time.